Let's go.
Welcome to Citizen. We've got a very special guest today, Chris from formerly of Pardon My American, now of The Last Americans.
Yes.
Because you guys are terrorists.
Apparently.
It's like all of my friends are terrorists. Mike Glover's company, and all they do is like preparedness. There's no political element to it at all, even on the shows he does. All it is like prepper stuff.
Yeah.
And they're like, yeah, he's part of a fucking insurgent terrorist organization. Like, no, he's just teaching people how to like hunt and stuff.
Well, that was a thing for a little while, wasn't it? Like you become prepared for the worst. You're now one of the people that could cause the worst.
Yeah, well, yeah, I guess if they didn't want people like us running around out there, they shouldn't have sent us to all these dumbass wars.
Yeah, right.
And trained us to do all this stuff. That seems like maybe their fault, to be honest.
Yeah, right. Now everyone's like, everyone that was involved in any of the wars now, like, we know what the worst could be. So we know what to prepare for now.
Yeah. So tell me about your guys' backstory. It's you and Dave and Greg. And you guys started out in Portland area, right?
Yeah, around Portland, Oregon. We're about 45 minutes north up the I-5 corridor from Portland. So, like, during all the whole 2020 election bullshit, we were, like, front and center to all, like, the formation of Antifa and all that stuff.
Yeah, part of the city got taken over.
Yeah.
By a real terrorist organization.
Yeah, and they actually were, like, trying to burn down city buildings and stuff. But the podcast kind of just started as just the three of us would hang out on the weekends, and we'd bullshit about all this stuff we talk about on the podcast anyway. And then we're just like, why don't we just record this? Like, we have all the equipment already, because Dave and Greg were both in bands. We have had all the recording equipment we needed. So one day we're just like, yeah, let's do it. So we started, and then shortly after we started, the 2020 election came around, and then we were talking about that, and then all of a sudden our channel started getting pretty big, getting a couple 100,000 downloads a month, and then shortly after the election, involving all the conspiracy theories regarding that, we were pulled from, well, Spotify owned Anchor, or they bought Anchor, and that's who we were distributing through. So Anchor pulled our shit, so we had to start over.
That's really weird to me, because there were a lot of people in this space who were saying pretty definitively, this is what happened, it's illegal, blah, blah, blah. But you guys are more like just shit talkers. Because you guys talk about pretty much, it wasn't even always, it still to this day isn't always just political conspiracy stuff. It's all kind of random bullshit.
Yeah, just random shit most of the time.
It's very weird to me. Like, if somebody is saying something that's out of line, I still don't support censoring that, but it does at least make sense to some degree. But when when people are getting penalized for asking questions and saying, hey, this doesn't really make sense, can you make it make sense for me, please?
Yeah.
And then you get penalized for that, that's kind of fucked up.
Yeah, and that was kind of the premise of our show. It's not like we weren't a breaking news show, or we weren't like breaking new trail on anything. We were literally looking at what was happening and what people were talking about and sharing our own ideas and opinions on it. And apparently that is frowned upon.
I guess, man, but I don't know. Like, it seems like it almost always backfires these days. You know what I mean? Like, you didn't, when I read these old dystopian novels, it never seems to be the case that, you know, Big Brother tries to do something, and because of that, the thing they tried to suppress gets way more traction. But that's happened a number of times. Like, a couple of media analysis companies looked into the Hunter Biden laptop story that was published on the New York Post.
Yeah.
I'm sure everybody remembers that shit.
Oh, yeah. The whole Twitter fiasco with it.
Yeah. What was it? August of 2020, I think. It was right before the election.
Like that, yeah.
And their analysis suggested that the story got 4 times more coverage because it was suppressed, right? Because people started because you can see it these days. Some crazy ass shit will happen, and people will be like, oh, that's fucked up. And they'll post about it on Twitter. And then the next day, some crazy shit will happen and they'll be talking about that and completely forget about the other thing. But it does seem like these days, especially when the government or media or whomever, social media tries to suppress something, it almost always backfires.
Well, yeah, I think now people have gotten to the point where as soon as they try to, oh, well, that's not actually happening, we need to take that down. Well, then now people are asking, well, if it wasn't real, why are you so concerned about it?
Right. Yeah. Well, I mean, that's a good point too, because then we're talking about things like kids getting taught CRT or weird gender stuff in schools. Yeah. And then someone like DeSantis passes a law to ban it. And they're like, why are Republicans so obsessed with this? It's not even happening. I'm like, okay, cool. If it's not happening, why are you so concerned that it's now been banned?
Exactly.
You know what I mean? That doesn't make a lot of sense.
Yeah.
I think it's a function of how completely fucked our epistemology is. Like we just don't have a core set of facts that govern social discourse anymore. Nobody agrees on everything. Yeah. You know what I mean? Like it used to be, we all agreed on the facts and we debated the best way to go about, operating in that particular environment. So we all understand, generally speaking, how there were two main schools of economics. There were Keynesian economics and then Austrian economics, right? And they kind of battled each other to see which one was going to be best or which one was going to be implemented. And now it's just like, why don't we just end work and pay people? I'm sorry, what economic system is that, motherfucker? That sounds not great to me, But it's like we're operating on, it's almost like arguing in two different languages. It's like the picture that comes into my head is two New York cab drivers, right? One from the Sudan and one from like fucking Thailand or some shit. Yeah. And they're arguing in languages, neither of them. They're arguing in broken English.
They're just yelling at each other, but neither one of them understands what's
Nobody
going on.
knows what the fuck is going on. It's like, all right, well, this is productive.
Yeah.
Then this is the state of American discourse now. I don't understand it. I don't understand. I don't understand what the point is.
Yeah. Honestly, I think the main point of it is that exactly. I think they want people to not understand what's going on. And I think the more people argue with each other and there's no progress ever made as a unifying country, the better it is for any elite people or whatever.
Do you think it's like, to use some religious allegory, like the modern Tower of Babel, where in the story of the Tower of Babel, the Jews were trying to build a temple to get to heaven, or not a temple, but a tower to get to heaven, right?
Yeah.
They wanted to outsmart God. So to get around that or to punish them or whatever, God sent them to the four corners of the earth and made them speak all different languages, right? So now they can't communicate with each other. It seems a lot like that.
A little bit. I think a lot of it, especially in this country, and it's already happened in a lot of other countries where the government body thinks of themselves as such an elite that they need to dictate what happens to everyday person's life. When in this country, which is why we have the Constitution, that's the one thing that's different from every other country there is it's kind of the other way around, or it's supposed to be the other way around. And I think the bickering back and forth between people and not really paying attention to what's going on, and then in doing so with this, like you were saying, with the school systems and stuff, not teaching anything, people have forgotten or even understand that we ultimately dictate what happens in our country.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. There does seem to be a lot of people who think that the government, quote unquote government, is some kind of external abstraction that's separate from people. And then they also think that that is what constitutes the United States. Yeah. You know what I mean? They think the United States is the government and the people, but they were never supposed to be different, right? Yeah. We went to pretty great lengths to avoid an aristocracy here. Even if you look at some of the writing in the late 18th century about how we're going to refer to the president, even. There were all these honorific titles that were suggested, like His Majesty the President and all this other bullshit. And George Washington was like Mr. President, and that's it. That was the quote, right? It's like, Mr. President, that's it. Like, I'm just a fucking dude with a job here.
Yeah.
But unfortunately, aristocracies have a way of creating themselves. I think, there's always winners and losers in life.
Yeah.
And that is just a fact. Some people are going to be successful and some people are not going to be successful. And that's just the nature of the game, right? But when the people who are in the moderately successful portion, when they get comfortable with their own level of success and stop keeping an eye out, I guess, for assholes, then the aristocracy is going to come about. That's just how it is.
Yeah.
It's unfortunate. I don't know what to do about that. I'm not sure if there is actually a way to avoid that. I don't know if there is.
I think maybe there would be, but it would be a lot harder of a task, honestly. Like, it'd have to be like a complete cultural shift. It'd change the way people thought entirely. Because like, once you get in that position, you kind of stop thinking about society as a whole and more of what's going to progress me the most.
Yeah. And the other part of that is that all of the things that contribute to your comfort will now be leveraged against you. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, we'll take your house away if you don't do what we want you to do. That's a real fear for a lot of people.
Well, we've seen that almost exact situation when it came during the pandemic, right? It's like, you have to do this or this is getting taken away. You have to have this or you can't go do this.
Yeah. Yeah, that's not great.
Yeah.
We
were heading in a very scary path there for a little bit.
Well, I think we still are. I think that was a shot across the bow, and now we're going to see more and more of that stuff as time goes on. But that's why I started this show, because it isn't enough to love America or to support whatever, values you think are American, or to be patriotic even and love the country, the government, whatever the fuck. Obviously that's not enough, because it's lip service. Like, you can just say that and that's it.
Yeah.
But the definition of a citizen is somebody who, takes it upon themselves to secure their rights by performing the responsibilities required of them to secure those rights. Otherwise, you're just kind of, the analogy I use is like, you're a teenager living at your parents' house. You know what I mean? Like, you haven't actually done anything yet. You're just benefiting from somebody else's work. Yeah. But in that scenario, you got to listen to what mom and dad say, right? And in that scenario, mom and dad are the fucking government. And I'm not really keen on listening to people tell me what to do, right? As an adult.
Yeah. And I feel like we're kind of getting to a point where people have to start realizing that in order to make changes or to live how Americans are supposed to live, it's kind of in our own hands. The government isn't going to save anybody.
No.
They're just going to do what they do. And regardless of how that affects the people, what they think is best is what they're going to do.
What do you think? Why do you think there's so much like hero worship these days? It's like, people fell in love with Obama, people fell in love with Trump, but it got to a point where, and it isn't just the individuals, but it's also the political parties, where people back themselves into a corner where they almost forced themselves to have to defend really shitty behavior. Yeah, because it was their person doing it.
I don't know. I feel like that's honestly been going on for a long time. I feel like that whole ideal of kind of like how in the 2020 election there, it was like a blue no matter who thing on the Democrat side. That is an insane ideology. Like, you're going to support someone that says they're on your side regardless of what happens, regardless of what is said. I honestly think a lot of that comes down to hoping someone. I think a lot of people just hope someone is going to do something for them so they don't actually have to take action themselves. or take responsibility even. I think that's a kind of a big thing. A big problem is nobody's willing to actually stand up and be like, something needs to change here.
Well, it's because to me, it's the same reason that people will, if they're walking down the street and somebody trips and falls, they'll avert their eyes. I used to think that it was because they didn't want to embarrass the person, but now I know it's because they didn't want to, like, once you put eyes on that problem, it becomes your problem as well.
Well,
like,
you have to deal with that reality
yeah.
now.
Well, not only do you have to deal with that reality, but there is some expectation that you're going to go help solve that problem, even though you didn't create it, had nothing to do with you, but you're there and capable of solving the problem. And I think that's when we started taking winners and losers out of society and giving participation trophies. And then when we started, whatever the additional things that happened around that, where human beings in the West lost so much perspective. Like there's no connection in people's mind, no organic connection in people's minds between effort and outcome anymore. Right? A big swath of the population expects a certain outcome, and that's what we call equity now, apparently. They expect a certain outcome, and whatever has to happen to get to that outcome isn't their problem. It's somebody else's problem. It's society's fault, or it's racism, or it's whatever the fuck. It's like, no, dude.
Well, it's not even like racism or anything like that. It's kind of just goes on everything, like we were just saying. Like it's whatever has to happen as long as it's not me that has to do it.
Yeah. But that's the thing about pretty much anything in life. When you take a shortcut or when you outsource your responsibilities to somebody else, there's always a price to pay. And we do that as a community, right? Or as a society, rather. And it makes sense sometimes. So we trade off, like I could grow corn, I could grow wheat and grind it into flour and all this stuff. I'm not doing that. It's just not going to happen, right? Yeah. But, for a while it was okay because there were professionals doing that stuff, and then it became industrialized, and now it's full of pesticides and preservatives that fuck your body up, right? Yeah. So on a long enough timeline, subjugating yourself to the will of somebody else is always going to have a price, and it's usually your fucking life and freedom.
Yeah, because eventually it always comes down to what benefits them over you.
Mm-hmm. And that's going to be the bottom line, typically, right? That's why corn syrup is in everything now. Mm-hmm. Almost every fucking product that you buy, there's corn syrup in it. And I've told people this a million times now, but before it was used in human food, it was used to fatten up pigs. For the last month or so before they got slaughtered, they would feed them this just synthetic sugar to put more fat on them. Yeah. Right. So you get better bacon or whatever.
Well, the same thing with just sugar too. Yeah. Sugar's in everything. Like it's almost harder to find something that doesn't have sugar in it than it is just to go to the grocery store and buy what you need to buy.
Yeah. So, I mean, these are very concrete examples with like deliverable products. So it makes sense. But it is also the case when you let somebody else do your thinking for you, right? Yeah. If you're letting Fox or CNN or MSNBC do your thinking for you, you're fucked. Like your brain is in just as bad a shape as all these people out here with diabetes because they've been eating shitty food. You got brain diabetes now, and you can't think for yourself anymore.
Brain diabetes, I like that.
Yeah. And I think that's where the collapse in epistemology came from. It became, people read Brave New World or 1984 and they see the state that people are in and how much control the government has. But I haven't seen very many dystopian novels that track the process. How do we get here exactly, right? Because in Brave New World, we wake up in a time period where soma is being prescribed to suppress people's emotions and shit like that. In 1984, it's already pretty fucked when we get there.
Yeah,
I'm looking for the dystopian novel that shows
the beginning,
like the incremental process through which people think that it's just the government making more laws that slowly strips away our liberty. And I guess in a reductive way to some degree that's true, but really what it is us letting go. right?
Yeah.
It's like we're playing tug of war, and we just like one person at a time says fuck this and takes their hands off the rope and goes home.
Yeah, it's usually not like a couple things that happen that just changes everything. It's like the boiling the frog kind of thing. It happens over time, and you just are slowly letting it happen and getting used to the fact that now you're just less of an individual than you were the day before.
Yeah, and I guess it's happened to some degree in a couple of in a lot of South American states that had relative freedom and liberty, and then in the middle part of the 20th century, communism showed up, and that never goes well for anybody, right? But we haven't had a country like the United States yet on Earth, one that had a constitution that guaranteed certain things to ordinary people, not to aristocrats or any of that stuff, not like the Magna Carta, but like the actual just ordinary run-of-the-mill people. So I don't know that there's not really a historical precedent for what's happening in the U.S. right now. Even in Canada, they don't really have a Bill of Rights like we do. They have a charter of what are essentially recommendations, right, from 1981. So they're not even that old. They're the same age as me, as a matter of fact. But no, like the other Western countries, they're parliamentary monarchies and things like that. But no, not us. We are supposed to just pick an ordinary person that we like and whose values we agree with and say, hey, all right, you can run shit for a little while, but only for a little while. Yeah. But that's not how we do it here. It's like entrenched bureaucrats in the Congress and behind the scenes. The president, to me, is almost irrelevant at this point. Like, I think that's just a lightning rod.
Yes, I think that the president does hold a lot of powers that you wouldn't normally have, but rarely do they get executed. And as far as like the bureaucratic bullshit, yeah, it's the same thing as it's the boiling frog. It started as one thing. It slowly over time became something completely different that doesn't work at all anymore. So there's something that needs to happen with that. Nobody pays attention to what our Constitution actually is anymore. Yeah. I mean, it would be. We should have written in the margins in the Bill of Rights and said, any kind of law you're thinking about passing, any kind of right you're thinking about limiting, even if it makes sense. Imagine that power in the hands of your worst political enemy, because at some point they will have that power, because that's just the tides of politics, right? Like sometimes you win, sometimes you lose. I think people would take it a lot more seriously if they were able to make that connection. I don't think people even think about that. It's like, I don't think a lot of people think about that. I don't think the majority of people in this country nowadays think about the Bill of Rights or Constitution ever.
Well, the Republicans and even a lot of people on the left, too, the Democrats who authorized war in Iraq and Afghanistan back in the day, probably didn't think that sleepy Joe Biden would be using that to fight a proxy war in Ukraine in 2023, right? But that's exactly what the fuck's happening.
Yeah. Well, that, and now you have all that other shit coming out with the accounts and everyone getting money from Ukraine and all these other fucking governments, and there's no wonder why so much money is going over there.
Tell me more about that. What do you know about that?
Well, it just came out, I think, here a couple of days ago or whatever. I think that now there was deals made through Burisma that Hunter Biden was involved with, and that's kind of old news, but...
Well, it's not old news that the CEO recorded him and the president, vice president at the time.
And the fact that he recorded him, and not only recorded him one time, but recorded him over a dozen times. No. And that the FBI decided when they reluctantly handed over the documentation for that, they decided to redact all that stuff, that they even had those recordings in the first place. Which tells me you knew about this in the beginning.
Sure, yeah.
And you're covering it up because somebody's getting money from somewhere, I imagine.
I guess. I mean, this is a really interesting question. I've never had. Well, I guess I have Ilya Shapiro before, but I never had the opportunity to ask a constitutional attorney how it makes sense for the executive branch to be in charge of all the enforcement mechanisms in government except for the Supreme Court. Although they do appoint the Supreme Court and the Senate votes on it, but the the Department of Justice technically reports to the president, right? That's part of the executive branch of government. So the people that are supposed to be investigating Joe Biden right now work for Joe Biden. It feels an awful lot like a college football team that's made some recruiting violations, and they're kind of self-governing at this point. You know what I mean?
Yeah, like he said it almost like, because a lot of this stuff dates back to when he was a senator or vice president even.
Yeah.
So before he even got in. So the fact that he may be able to set up this stuff in preparation to where he now would have control over the DOJ, and it wouldn't affect him anyway, even if information did come out, he could just do away with anything that was going to happen in the first place.
Yeah, I mean, we saw it with Obama for sure. Like this Russia collusion hoax with the Steele dossier. Obama knew that it was fake. Biden knew that it was fake. The head of the FBI knew that it was fake. The DNI, the head of the CIA, they all knew it was fake.
Yeah.
We know that now. We know that they had the information to know that it was fake. But they still all said in public that it was real. Right? Even Hillary Clinton, who faked it herself, which, I mean, obviously she was going to say it was real because she's the one that did the crime in the first place. But all of these people said it was real. And then the Hunter Biden laptop comes out and 51 former intelligence officers say that it's fake with no evidence to that effect, right?
Yeah.
It's like, all right, cool.
Just taking their word for it.
Yeah, it's like, trust me, bro, is the source on that one.
Yeah.
I don't know how you move forward from that. I mean, I haven't listened to you guys in the last couple of weeks, but what are your thoughts on all this stuff? What are your thoughts on Trump being president again, or DeSantis being president, and who, like, is there any expectation that this time Trump will take it seriously and fire everybody at the FBI, for example, if he were to be elected?
I don't think he would fire everyone at the FBI. I don't think the FBI or those organizations will go away. I think if anything was to happen, you might have like leadership change, obviously. But we're on the show. We're kind of split between DeSantis, Trump. Like, what's going to be best? Obviously, Trump has his flaws also, and I mean everyone has their flaws. And if he was to get in, I mean, this is kind of his last shot, right? I mean, if he says he's going to take care of this, either you need to do it, or people are going to think of you as a piece of shit because you didn't do what you said you're going to do. So, I mean, regardless of who gets in, I think we're at the point where something needs to be done. I think everyone is under the same understanding that people need to be changed out and things need to change, because there definitely is some weird illegal shit going on that needs some attention brought to it. And as of right now, with Joe Biden in office and the DOJ that's there and FBI, obviously it's not getting done.
Yeah, but it didn't get done during Trump's first term either.
True.
Right? Like, it was pretty clear that the FBI and the CIA were completely corrupt during his entire. He was being lied about by his own employees.
Yeah.
Right. And did the only thing he really did in retaliation was to say it was fake news, which is a good soundbite, but it doesn't actually do anything.
Yeah. I mean, it's kind of a put up or shut up at this point. Like, granted, the rally season hasn't really officially started because Trump is the only one doing it so far. But it's going to be really interesting when it comes down to different rallies, who's running, who's not running, and then the debates and like who's saying they're going to take care of what. And then you have to go on who's actually going to do what they say.
Yeah, well, yeah, that's why I think a lot of people are leaning. A lot of people I talk to, anyways, are leaning towards DeSantis more. I mean, I don't think there's any world where they're going to vote for Biden over anybody that's a Republican, probably, unless it's like what's that fucking dummy's name in New York? That congressman that's a weirdo. Fuck.
Oh, I forget what his name is.
The one that's a Brazilian cross-dresser or some shit. If it's somebody like him, obviously that would be a problem. But anybody that's a reasonable conservative or Republican, whatever you want to call them, obviously people are going to vote for that person. But and the primary season is going to be pretty wild. This is going to be the wildest primary season we've seen in a long time.
Oh yeah, I feel like it's going to get pretty crazy, especially with like, especially on the dim side, you have RFK running, and then he's with his whole anti-vax thing, and like, I mean, at that point on the dim side, who else do you have? You have, as of right now, you have Joe Biden and RFK.
Yeah,
that's who the options are on that side. And there's a lot of people, even on the dim side, going, I don't know if we can go through Joe Biden again.
Yeah. I mean, what position do you put yourself in if he's dead halfway through the second term? You know, I mean, he's old as shit. He can barely walk anymore. It's clearly getting progressively worse now.
Yeah.
Where
it has
like,
been.
Yeah. He's like wandering around, lost all the time, and has to be told where to go.
Well, on top of that, with all the investigations that are going on with all his shit, does he even make it to that point? Does he bow out, or do they run the 25th Amendment on him, or what's going to happen with that?
Yeah, it's a good question. I don't really know, man. To be honest, I thought this would have been over already. I didn't think they would have nominated him in the first place. It seemed like there were better options, but maybe they weren't looking for a better option. Maybe they were just looking for somebody to control, right? I mean, everybody will always play that Obama clip where he's like, you know, in the perfect world, I would have somebody else in office.
Oh, yeah, sitting in the basement telling them what to do,
It's like, you probably shouldn't have said that out loud, bud. Because that kind of seems like what's happening now.
Because there's no way this guy is running anything on his own.
No. I mean, he doesn't... To be honest, I kind of think that he's just walking around in a poopy diaper all the time. That's what it seems like.
I mean, that's what he walks like.
Yeah. It is. Oh, man. I guess we went through this to some degree in the tail end of Reagan's presidency. And without social media and stuff, they probably did a better job of covering it up. But this is bad. I mean, we look like a bunch of assholes on the global stage right now. We look like idiots.
Well, that's one of the good things with the social media now. You can't escape anything anymore.
Yeah, certainly not. So for this show, again, the purpose is to identify the difference between people who are subjects and citizens, right? And it's that attitude, like, nobody's coming to save you. You need to learn some skills and fucking, you know, be part of this stuff. I say this a lot on the show, but Plato said that if you refuse to take part in your own governance, then you're doomed to be ruled by fools, right? It's like people with an axe to grind or a dollar to make are going to be in control of things, and they don't necessarily have your best interest in mind.
Yeah.
So, you know, I wrote these principles, and I think some of them are getting harder. Some of them are getting harder to convince people that they're worthwhile. Like, I'll reject divisiveness in all its forms, because anybody that's trying to divide you is trying to conquer you by definition, right? It's like what we were talking about a few minutes ago. Why is somebody splitting us up into little groups and stuff like that?
Yeah.
The only reason they do that is to make sure that they can maintain control over you. But it's a problem that starts internally and works its way out. What I mean by that is, it would be really hard for me to convince a conservative or libertarian person to team up with a leftist person when the leftist person won't say what a woman is. When they're afraid to say the definition of a fucking woman, which everybody on this planet knows.
Yeah.
And there are people who have deluded themselves to some degree, but the vast majority of these people are just lying because they're scared of what might happen if they tell the truth. It's hard to tell somebody who's just a normal fucking person to, like, oh, you got to go work with that guy. You just got to figure it out. Like, we're operating on two different fucking, like, we're not even in the same universe at this point, right?
No, not even close.
So how do you do that? I mean, from your perspective, you guys kind of had to flee, you know, Oregon, Washington area because it was so crazy up there, right?
It started to, yeah. Like, we're obviously just north of Portland, Oregon, and I mean, when we left, it was at the point of like everything was starting to bleed in. Like everyone, the Portland area was getting crazy and getting expensive, and people were just leaving. And you go, even today, you go downtown Portland and the shit's boarded up everywhere.
Yeah.
Like, it's insane.
So what was the deciding factor to leave?
Honestly,
because it wasn't just you guys, by the way. Target, Costco,
Walmart left.
Walmart, yeah. It's like it's not just people.
Well, I think a lot of it is it's kind of the same thing we were talking about, like a responsibility thing, like a morality thing. I think a lot, like Walmart left the Portland area because they were losing so much money because people were just constantly stealing from them. And when it came to us, we were looking into the future going, we can see the trend of where things are going right now. Obviously, this is not going to be good for our community. As soon as like people start leaving Portland and coming in, they just end up bringing their political ideologies also. And especially when it comes to schooling and stuff for our kids also, like the schooling aspect of everything was probably one of the bigger ones. Things were getting so ridiculous. They were just like, I don't really want my kids going to school here. And so we're like, okay, well, we ended up hooking up and meeting you guys, and we're like, okay, we have an opportunity with our podcast. And then also the weather's better. School systems tend to be better.
It gets pretty hot here, but yeah, the weather's better.
And then it honestly, it was, when it comes to the political atmosphere that was changing in the Northwest, it was kind of an easy decision.
And how you guys have been here, what, like a year now?
Coming up on about 9 months, yeah.
And what have you noticed that's different here compared to where you came from?
Well, here in the Austin area, I've noticed that honestly, the Austin area is like, it's still a little liberal, but it's like Portland was 10, 15 years ago, where it was still cool. Like you could deal with people having different things, where people agreed with each other and everyone was nice to each other. That's kind of how it feels in Austin right now. When it comes to political atmosphere, obviously Texas is a red state, and they have different legislation that we more agree with than Washington does. And school systems, I think Texas just passed that thing where teachers are allowed to be armed now.
Oh, really? I didn't know that. And
like they can take their training and be armed at schools now. So we're like, yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah, that's good. I mean, that certainly sounds better. I mean, look, I've lived in liberal cities a lot in my adult life. I lived in Oakland for a while. I spent a lot of time in Seattle and LA.
Seattle's really bad now too.
Yeah, it's fucked. I was there in like 2015 to 16 time period. It's still pretty nice then. Although people did get stabbed downtown a lot for some reason, but sometimes that kind of
they
stuff.
didn't believe in guns. But you had to figure out another way.
Yeah. But yeah, it does seem to have deteriorated pretty rapidly. And I don't know. It's so odd how it happened. Like Portland and Seattle have always been kind of weird cities, the same way as Austin. There's a weirdness to it, and it was so weird that they made a TV show about it, right? Portlandia. Yeah. Which Portlandia was an ironic musing about the silly shit that happens in that city. And then it seemed like, I don't even know. It's like you do a caricature to make fun of something and people just like make that their identity then. Yep. That's fucking weird.
Yeah, it's like here this is, and we're making fun of it. Yeah. But then they're like, oh, we have to embrace this, but also double.
It's like, this is what we do now. Is this like, oh boy, that's bizarre, man. Yeah. What the fuck are you doing? I don't understand it. I really don't. I don't understand. I don't understand how. Well, I understand the mechanics. Let me back up. I understand the mechanics of what happened. People, stop enforcing the law, and this is pretty much what happens. And we also know that Soros and Soros-backed foundations have paid for about 280 judge and district attorney races in the U.S. over the last 5 years. They spent about $2 million on Gavin Newsom's recall. So they're heavily invested in people in major cities and states who refuse to enforce the law. Now, what could possibly be their goal in that? You know what I mean? Like I don't, it can't possibly be anything good.
No. I feel like that goes right back to the whole division thing. I think as soon as you are able to dictate something and make it unstable, there is no cohesive way for people to get together and defend what they think, because they're all under this weird trance of just everything's crazy now. So then you're able to implement everything that you want and change things the way you want them to be changed.
But to what end? I mean, what do you think about Soros? Now, he's going to retire now and turn over the
I think
keys
he already did
to his son.
Yeah, I read an
Alexander,
article that he already turned it over to his son. It was they're saying is even more political than he was.
Yeah, but what do you? I mean, do they? I can't really understand the whole picture. Like some of it, I do, I guess, just by assuming the worst. But why would these people care so much about the U.S. and stuff that goes on here? I just don't. It doesn't make a lot of sense to me. Like China is spending way more money than we are, and their economy is in better shape than ours.
True. I think the one thing that's different about the U.S. is, like we're saying with the whole Constitution. I think we're the one thing in the world that, if we were all to unite under the same ideology, there would be no stopping it. Like we are the one powerhouse in the world that doesn't abide by anyone else's rules. We do our own thing. We have our own set of rules, and they can do whatever they want over there, but this is how we do things. And I think that is the one thing that they would want after, especially if they're wanting to do the whole World Economic Forum, world government type thing idea that they have. That stands in the way of that.
I mean, it makes sense. I guess it makes sense. I mean, it's certainly easier to try to control the United States than it is to try to control China, right? Because they'll just fucking kill you.
Yeah.
They don't give a shit. China doesn't really care about, well, not that they don't care about it, but they are not nearly as concerned about how other people see them as we are about how people see us, for sure. They just do whatever the fuck they want. They're over there sewing human faces on monkeys and shit.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't. It is sometimes exhausting just to talk about all this stuff, because it's like relentlessly every day.
Oh yeah.
You're being fucked with. You know what I mean? And I feel like the only solution to something like that, like if it was a bully on a playground or a pest or something like that, the only solution is to beat the Christ out of the guy, right? Like that. Really, that's what you would do in any other situation.
And I mean, that's why on our show we have a discussion about shit going on like that, and then we just try to have fun with everything else. Because if you do every day just diving in, you're going to drive yourself insane.
Well, tell me, have you guys changed the show up at all, or is it just a new name now?
It's basically the same.
Okay. Tell me about the show and everything. How, like, what the format is, what you guys talk about, and stuff like that.
So it's basically a current events, kind of anything that's happening. Obviously, we touch on and look into the big political aspect of things that are happening, and we do the show every day. So anything that happens, we usually end up talking about. But for the most part, it's just current events, just weird shit happening. The kids getting lost in the jungle.
That's a crazy
plane
ass
crash
story.
And surviving
for like 40
days.
days. What the hell? What are you, Moses or some shit?
Yeah, like on their own. I think there was 4 of them, right? There was a 13-year-old, a 9-year-old, 4-year-old, and a 1-year-old.
And they were just eating like rats, like rations and fucking fruit they find around. I guess I would have done that when I was 12. I don't know, to be honest.
I don't know if I would have.
Well, do you remember those Mormon kids in Mexico, where all the adults in their family got wiped out when they were driving?
Oh yeah.
And then the 11-year-old girl just walked like 25 miles to get help.
Yeah.
There's no fucking way I was doing that when I was 11, dude.
No, that takes some big time willpower.
Holy underwear, I think is what it is.
And those kids in the jungle too had to watch their mom die while they're there.
Yeah, I don't know what happened with that story.
So apparently, the plane crashed in the Amazon.
Well, that's not great. Right off the get-go, that sucks.
And then the mom, from what I read, suffered some severe injuries, and she died after like a few days.
Oh man, so it was like a slow process.
Yeah, and then the kids had to first watch their mom die in front of them, and then had to live another 35 days to be able to be rescued. The fact that anybody even found them was amazing.
Yeah, what did they track the transponder or something? After, I mean, they would have found them quicker than 40 days if the black box had been there, right?
I'm not exactly sure how they found him. I don't know if like some tribe people or something exactly. I'm sure they tracked something.
Yeah.
Otherwise, I mean, the Amazon's a vast thing to have to look through.
So about the rest of the show, so you guys just talk about whatever sports, whatever comes up.
Yeah, whatever sports. I mean, there was one story where this lady had set up a game camera in her backyard or whatever, and then caught some weird witch people coming.
I saw
eating
that.
A deer carcass.
What the fuck, man?
Yeah, like
those people probably have trichinosis now. By the way,
yeah.
Like I love meat, love it. Don't eat fucking roadkill. Dumbass.
Yeah, because it had been sitting there for days.
Oh my god, man! And they were dressed like all weird.
Yeah, they had like loincloths on and like.
Where was that?
I don't remember where that was. It was in the South here somewhere.
God damn! The way when I first saw it, it looked like the first season of True Detective. Remember that shit? I was like, what the fuck is this real? Is this going on? I thought it was a prank or something, to be honest, because there's all like these fake people put on suits and stuff and do this fake Bigfoot stuff all the time. I was like, this is not real.
Yeah.
There's no way.
It kind of makes you wonder if like, because obviously I think she was in like a small town. So somebody knows those fucking people.
Somebody has to, unless it's like The Village, right? That M. Night Shyamalan thing where it's like somebody bought a trailer park and just turned it into like a 17th century.
And every once in a while, a couple of them escape and go eat deer out of a backyard.
It's like Rumspringers and shit. So the show is you and Dave and Greg.
Yeah.
And do you all have like a role in the show? Like who does what?
Yeah, kind of. I mean, Greg is more the conspiratorial type guy.
His hair looks like somebody that might be conspiratorial.
Yeah, he's got big hair.
He's got like the alien guy. What was it? What's the name of that show?
The cartoon?
Ancient Aliens.
Ancient Aliens,
Yeah, the dude with the aliens.
Yeah.
That guy.
Yeah.
Greg's got that
Not
look.
saying it's aliens,
Yeah,
but it's aliens.
Yeah.
He's definitely more into like in the conspiracy. I am a little to a point. I mean, some of the stuff is pretty far out there, but it's fun to entertain.
Yeah.
Dave kind of plays the other side of that. He likes to be a little combative and like, push back and like share different kind of ideas and try to look things at the other side. And me, I kind of just run the show, run the cameras, run the streams, and I interject and share my own thing. I'm kind of the middle guy.
That's fun. Yeah. And it's been like that ever since I first came across you guys. It's always kind of been that same general formula, which is that's what makes it super weird to me that you guys ever got blacklisted somewhere, because Greg will say a bunch of crazy shit and Dave's like, that's not fucking real.
Yeah, like he'll say something and Dave immediately is like, okay, that sounds fucking dumb.
Yeah. It's like, what, you can't even have a conversation. You can't even like half of the time Greg's just saying crazy shit to say crazy shit too.
Yeah.
Like you could tell that he's just talking out of his ass. But it is funny. It's interesting, right?
Yeah.
I just don't understand why anybody would want to censor that of all things.
Yeah,
It makes you wonder.
I don't know exactly. I think just because we were talking about things that were clearly in the news that they were wanting to suppress, and because it was on our show, we got suppressed and lumped into some people also. Which sucks.
That's weird though, because we were doing that stuff too, pretty hardcore, and audio listener wise, I think our show was probably bigger.
Yeah.
And I never noticed a lot of audio suppression. Video for sure. YouTube hates us. They still hate us.
Well, it started because I mentioned we got kicked off of Anchor, which is where we were at. And then because Spotify owned them.
Was it like, how long after Spotify bought them did you guys get the boot from there? Do you know?
I think it was pretty quick. I don't remember exactly when Spotify bought them out. I think it was shortly after. Because it was...
Well, do you know when you guys got booted?
It was right after the 2020 election.
It looks like They started the purchase sometime in late 2019. So
so it was a year afterwards.
yeah, but that doesn't mean that's when it went through. Oh no, it was February 6th, 2019. So about a year and a half later.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't remember. So you guys communicate with any other similar shows aside from ours? And did anybody else get clipped for this? Because I don't remember hearing about a lot of shows getting canceled except for like Alex Jones and shit.
No, we don't really, have any other connections, honestly, with other shows. We don't talk to anybody else. We just kind of do our own thing. And when we got kicked off, we were like, well, shit. Okay, well, what do we got to do here? And we reached out to Anchor. We obviously, nobody can ever get a hold of Spotify for anything.
No, that's the one company that I don't think they have customer service.
Yeah, I don't think so either, because I've got a hold of one guy before, and he sent me an email to some other guy, and I sent an email to him, and then I've never heard anything from them ever again. But okay, so they pulled us. They canceled our thing. We got pulled from everything. I was like, okay, what do we do now? We want to keep doing this. Mm-hmm. Obviously, we're having fun doing it, and we're just seeing a lot of growth.
Yeah.
So we started up on Podbean and started another RSS feed and started completely over from zero.
Yeah, it sucks.
It really sucks. And then we're growing from there, and then that's when we met you guys at Drinking Bros, and then hooked up there. We're still kind of growing. We hit like a little plateau. Like nothing would break through anything anymore for some reason. And then we switched over to another distribution company, and they got us back on Spotify. And then Spotify reached out to them and said, you have to remove these guys.
So you're still not on there?
For Pardon My American,
the new
no.
show.
The new show is on Spotify.
Okay. And the new show is called The Last Americans.
The Last Americans podcast, yeah.
And before we got to get out of here, tell everybody anything different about that show now, or is it just kind of you're just carrying it over from the old?
It's 100% the same exact show, just retitled.
Okay, and it's available everywhere then.
Everywhere.
Now on audio?
Get on Spotify, get on Google, Apple, anywhere you listen to podcasts, you can go. We're on YouTube and Instagram and Rumble. And
is it so? It's a different YouTube account as well. The Last Americans. Is it the Last Americans podcast?
Last Americans podcast. Everywhere you look for it, look up Last Americans podcast. The whole thing.
Sweet. Well, look, I appreciate you coming back in today to do this stuff.
Fun,
I hope we had some deer tacos and steaks and shit too. That was pretty nice. I murdered that deer the other day, so pretty happy that my buddy was able to come in and cook those. Look, thanks for coming back by. I appreciate it. It's been a good
thank
show,
you, man.
Yeah, anytime. You guys go check out the Last Americans podcast wherever you consume your media, whether it's audio or YouTube or Rumble or anywhere else. Just look them up. And thank you all for listening. This has been Citizen.